Hi, Steph. How you doing? I'm sitting there going, wait a second. I'm like, wait a minute, Mr. Steph. I saw. I
Oh,
said
because the other voice.
I knew I had to give you the executive privilege to record me here. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually super excited today because we met, I think like I was counting, we've met over 20 years ago, which is crazy.
It is. It has to be around 20 years ago because I retired at 38, and I met you probably a year after I retired. So that's about right.
Which is crazy. I was like freshly out of college. So we met.
Thanks for making me feel old.
No. Well, that's what I was gonna say. We met 20 years ago and I've stayed the same, but
oh, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, and we'll get into you being retired at the age of 38 for sure. But I met when I was working as a trainer. I met you and we worked together for a long, long time. And like I got to know you personally and professionally on that level. And then I moved away to New York and I got disconnected I think I was gone for a few years, but then when I came back, I think it was like probably like 5 to 8 years. It
was a while. I mean, I'm not the best about that. I got to admit, I'm one of those people that, I don't talk to someone for 10 years and then I just all of a sudden decide to reach out and connect with them. I'm not very good at the, weekly checking in phone calls. So I have a lot of friends that I sometimes go, when I'm not living near them, we just drift apart. I don't know why that is, but
and that's what was weird because we literally, like, I saw you like 3 to 4 times a week previously. And then when I moved away, we kind of just got disconnected. And then when I came back, just different things. And I had been back for like 5 years. And then I was looking to transition out of my training job. And then I also had another business that I was running that I was looking to transition through. And I actually just connected with you on LinkedIn. Not anything, just you popped out of the hole.
You were my first LinkedIn connection because,
20 years ago though, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. I had nobody else. I had nobody else on it when I
retired. Right.
Yeah. So, I love the way you keep going retired, but I was retired for 15 years. So I think that qualifies. I mean, I did a lot of other things, but technically I was retired from what you would say was my field. So,
right.
But it was, what's interesting for me is how you meet people during your life. And, obviously you and I had a very good connection. And when I took this new position at Perch, one of the things about me that makes me a little old fashioned is I've always had a personal assistant because, I'm kind of pre-computer. I did most of my, I was an executive before computers like really were prolific and, email and all that stuff came up when I was doing that. So I never really learned how to do anything. And so that was one of my requirements when I took the job is I said, look, I know that in today's world, people don't do that. But I said, I need somebody that can help me to be more efficient, can keep me organized and everything. And then one of my key factors is it has to be someone I actually get along with because as you know, from doing the job for a period of time, there's a lot of, interaction about all kinds of things. And you get to see me hopefully at my best, but you may also get to see me at times when I'm like, under stress or, that kind of thing. And so it's very important. I trust the person who's my assistant. So I think it's kind of serendipity that you reached out to me at that point. You were the first
I have
person
to say,
me.
I know, but it was actually though, when I saw that, it wasn't necessarily to ask for a job. I just saw you and I was like, oh my God, like, how are you doing? And then like, we were going to connect to get coffee. And then you were just starting, I was kind of transitioning, phasing out of what I was doing, like figuring out what I was going to do. And then I was like, wait, do you need an executive assistant? And then
I actually recall me offering it to you without you even asking because
oh, really?
At that time, I just made the decision I needed to find someone. And then literally, that's why I say it was serendipity. It was like, maybe the next day you reached out and said, hey, we should catch up. And I, just said, what are you doing? And then we led us into that conversation that you were in a transitional point in your life. And I go, well, that's pretty convenient because if you'd be interested in doing this, I think I presented it the right way. I said, I think you'll learn. I think you'll learn a lot of stuff that you wouldn't think you would learn. It'll give you exposure to another skill that you could use. And look what's happened now. It's got you in a whole new career.
Yeah. And I have to say, like, you know, I tell you over and over, like how grateful I am to you. And I do think it's serendipitous. And then I think what's also funny that I think about how like you meet somebody like 20 years ago and you never know how that's going to like come back later in life. Like, cause I never knew, like now our roles, not that I was your boss back in the day, but you know, like we had a different role and now it's kind of like our roles kind of like changed.
I mean, I want to get metaphysical or anything. I am a very big believer that, you know, that you should treat people no matter what with respect, and, you know, that everything you do is, you know, a reflection of you. And, you know, the good thing for me was when I was in business, I may not necessarily been a warm fuzzy. I mean, you could sometimes see me when I have to be a little bit more of a school teacher type thing, but there's also the thought that I try to treat people with respect. I don't make anything personal. And because of that, you know, I usually am able to reform relationships with people. I have very few bridges I've burned. I mean, I think everybody has regrets in their life where they go, wow, I wish I would have handled that differently. But as a general statement, I think I've treated people pretty well in my career. And when I came back in, and there were people that I had really good relationships with that I knew had a lot of skills. I mean, I jokingly say I don't travel with an entourage, and I don't. I mean, I'm not someone that says, here's all my people that come with me when you hire me.
It's a small entourage.
But I do know people that have certain skills, like, you know, Gene Hodges, our marketing director, and, you know, Jan.
Well, let's actually, can I stop you there? Let's go back and kind of give an outline of like what your role, like who you are, your role, like where you started from. You retired at 38. So like what got you there, to kind of give some background for people.
Okay, well, I won't go back to birth because it will be too far, but I've always been kind of somebody that was very, I guess, business oriented. My mom would say this. I started a business when I was 12 selling fruits and vegetables door to door, because my parents' property happened to have a lot of trees and asparagus and stuff. And so I managed to, you know, save almost $2,000 selling avocados and stuff door to door.
Oh, that's cute.
And it was, I had a cigar box with all my money into it. And then, so I was always kind of focused on, you know, doing something different. How can I make, I mean, I'll be honest with you, at that time, how to make money so I can, you know, afford to do things. And, you know, through I had my first job, I think at that time was very common. My first job was McDonald's. And I, you know, parted ways with McDonald's relatively early. I mean, I can honestly say I was terminated for my first job for something stupid.
How old were you?
I was 16. And I made $2.35 an hour, which sounds like crazy now, but at the time it was, you know, I wanted to get a car, and I'll be honest with you, you can't get a car with $2.35 an hour, even back then.
And you got fired? You got fired from that?
Fired. I found out something that was a good lesson for me to learn, that, you know, you could be a good employee, but if you don't get along with your manager, and you know, I have a tendency to say things the way they are. And in this case, it kind of came back to bite me. But I learned something from it. And obviously I learned it very young. So I was out of work, and, you know, my career kind of came from the fact that I was out of work and I wanted to get a job. And, there was this place in Whittier, California called Sackett and Peters, and it was this home improvement center. There was kind of a big home improvement center before they existed. This is way before Home Depot and all the warehouse places. And they kind of had been there for 50 years. It had grown up with the city of Whittier, and it was the cool place to work. If you went to school in Whittier, this was the place. You didn't work at fast food, you worked at Sackett's, and it was a really big business. And so I kept going back. I couldn't get anybody to give me an interview. It was very frustrating. The owner's daughter, I didn't know at the time, was the person who gave you they had a math test, and they had you get an application, and you could apply once a week, and you had to take a new math test each time. And they wanted to know if you could, like, you know, do areas, and you had to know basic math, because back then you had to be able to cut lumber and do things.
All right. So were you not passing the math test?
No, actually what happened was I was a little bit of a round dude. So I was a little bit, you know, on the chubby side, like I still am on my whole life pretty much. And so what happened was, I think they just assumed that, well, he's, you know, a little overweight, he must be lazy, you know, that stereotype.
Right.
And so I actually was exactly the opposite. I took the test 5 times because they had 5 different tests, and I got 100% on every test. So she was kind of stunned because no one had ever done that. And she thought, this guy's really smart, but why won't they give him an interview? And so, being the owner's daughter, she told one of the managers they should interview this guy. He's like really smart. And, anyway, they gave me a job as a courtesy clerk, which is the guy that loads your car with steer manure and, gets change for the cashiers. And basically I'm like a shagging carts, all of that kind of stuff. I help the customers. So I started there, and within a very short period, I became a lumber salesperson. I worked in the lumber department, and then I learned how to do all kinds of different stuff. I learned how to rescreen doors, and I reglazed windows, cut pipe, threaded pipe. I mean, I know most people that know me now would go, "Really, Steve?" Yeah. But I knew how to do a lot of stuff. I learned.
You actually always say that you missed that part of it. Well, now, like in your role.
I mean, there's something satisfying about getting a load of lumber in and putting it away. And you feel like you accomplished something. I mean, sometimes in the jobs I've had, relatively the last 20 years, most of them are involved with, their meetings, their intellectual, and you don't go home and say, I put away something today. I stocked a shelf.
Right.
You have to get your satisfaction differently.
Right.
And it's usually a very delayed, like, I helped create this business, which takes a long time. So anyway, I did this, and what happened was I wanted to get ahead. They had an opening come up in the electrical department. I knew nothing about electricity.
That was getting ahead.
They said, well, we need a department head in the electrical and lighting. And I went, sure, I could do that. I've always had a lot of confidence. So I went in there. To be honest with you, I was really, someone one time told me that I could sell things, even though I know nothing I'm talking about, because I just sound confident. And that's half of it. I will say there's probably some people with some bad electrical things in their house because of me. But I did some innovative things. This store had been around for a long time, and they had these trailers with old product in them. And I mean, we're talking product that went back to like cords that were made out of material. That's how old, because they'd been around for 50 years. So I did something really innovative. I took everything out of the trailers and said, is it all on display? And I put everything on display.
You did what?
I put everything on display that was in the back room. There was a lot of stuff that wasn't even displayed. Over 50 years, they built it all up. So when I did that, big surprise, sales went up, and all of a sudden my department sales are like double. And then what ended up happening was I started taking over other departments.
What do you think gave you that insight? Like, not having any experience, like, what do you think gave you that insight to be like, oh, let's put this on display? And I mean, obviously it makes sense.
I guess I think this talking to me a lot and working with me. I'm a guy who likes to fix things. I mean, that's maybe the best way to say it. So I said, what's wrong? I need to fix the sales. I need to, and then if I fix the sales, then everybody in my department will bonus, which will make them work harder for me, which will then get to the next level. And so, what was the best way?
And how old are you? How old are you at this point?
17.
Okay, and you're already thinking in that, thinking in that way. Okay.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm kind of that's been my brain's kind of worked that way my whole life. Is how do I fix things?
Okay.
So anyway, what ended up happening was I did this, and then they said, well, why don't you take over the housewares department and the paint department because you're here anyway. And so I did that, and those departments started to do. I won't bore you with everything, but it went up. And then the big moment happened that probably led me on my path, which was I started meeting with they had a buyer that was over these departments, and he was kind of semi-retired. I say that he was getting paid, but he was retired. He wasn't really doing much. And so I started meeting with the vendors, and I started like building ads with them, and buying new product. And then he would assign I would do all the work, and then he would take credit for it. I didn't really care, because what I wanted was this stuff to drive my sales. So all of those departments started going way up. And then what ended up happening was they needed a new manager for the store. So the way the store was structured, there was a main manager, a store manager, then there were these assistant managers or supervisors. So that was a big promotion for me because I was.
So you were going to be the main manager, or
no, I was going to be. I'm going to be one of the supervisors, but I'm only 18.
Right.
So at that time I was up to 18, and so I take that job, and when I take that job, of course, I stopped doing the other job. So now I'm not doing this buying, I'm not doing this stuff, and those departments started to drop in sales. And my job now was to manage the whole store. So I had a lot of operational stuff I had to do because it was a very big store. It was like probably with under roof and outside and everything was probably 150,000 feet or more. And so what ended up happening was the sales started dropping, and then the vendors started getting mad because they wanted this young kid who looked like he was 12 to come back.
Well, and that's what I was wanting to say. Is it hard? I'm sorry to interrupt, but is it hard like at this point? Because I'm assuming these people are like in their 30s, 40s that you're working with, and they're dealing.
In most cases, yeah.
And I being in the industry now, like, yeah, they've been in the industry forever, and you're like 18. Is that hard for them to like take command from like an 18-year-old?
Yeah, it was really weird. I never perceived myself. If you look at the pictures of me from back then, I look like I was 12. I mean, I was very young looking. I mean, my son, and he's 25 and still looks like he's like 17.
Well, and I have this.
You can imagine me at 18. I looked younger than he did. So yeah, what happened was the vendors just liked the fact that I got stuff done.
Right.
I mean, I made decisions, and me, I make decisions really. I always have made them really fast. I'd say this is what I think we should do, and we do it. So what happened was the vendor started going to the general manager of the company at that time. That was the guy who'd been there forever, named Ted Somerset, and he was in his 70s. And he came to me, and I got called up to his office, and they had the offices were above the store, and they used to have windows that actually looked out through two-way glass at the whole building. So he has this big office up there, and I go up there, and it's very intimidating. I mean, I'm 18 years old, and I get called into his office, and I think I met him like twice. And he goes, I want to know, were you doing this stuff? And he starts talking about these ads and meeting with vendors and all this other stuff. And of course, I'm thinking I'm in trouble. I'm thinking I'm going to get fired because I really wasn't supposed to do this. And I'm thinking, well, I just finally got this manager job, and now I'm going to lose. And and I've been a manager now I've been a manager for like 5 months.
Okay.
And he goes, hey, we want to know if you'd be willing to do that as a real job. We're going to terminate the other guy because we figured out that he's not doing anything.
The guy above you?
The guy who was the buyer. They're going to get rid of him. And then he go, we want to make you the buyer. Now I'm 18, and they're going to make me the buyer for like 3, like patio and seasonal, housewares, electrical and lighting. I'm taking over all those departments. And, I mean, first of all, at the time, it was like, wow, I'm going to make like, they're going to pay me like $24,000 a year. I mean, that's.
Are you in school full time at this point too?
Yeah, I was going to high school, and then but back then it was very different. It's very different than today. I had like one class my second half of my high school year.
Okay.
One pottery class.
Yeah.
That was it.
Pottery.
Because I'd done all my stuff already. I'd already earned enough to graduate. So I had a work permit that allowed me to work 48 hours.
Okay. Okay.
So then during this period, I graduated. I should take it back. I graduated while I was a manager. And then by the time I got the buyer job, I was starting college.
Okay.
So what happened was I went, I'll do this. And it was really weird. So I go over there, and all of a sudden I got an office. And I got, I mean, it's like a cubicle, but it's like with high walls. To me, it was like, wow, I got a desk and a chair. And I mean, I'm like, I've got like 2 women that work out there that are kind of not my assistants, but they're like, they do what I tell them to because they work for me. Really strange.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my first meetings, this guy comes in, and he's this, guy from Sylvania Bolts. I mean, this is pretty scary. I remember this because that's 40 years ago. And he walks in, and I want to make a lot of changes to the Bold program because I now that I've got the power to do it, I can do it much faster. And I remember the first meeting, he walked in, and he was this guy who was probably in his about my age as I am now, about in mid 50s. And he goes, I tell him what I want to do, and he he doesn't think what I want to do is good. And then he goes, listen, son.
Oh.
And I don't know what it was, but somehow that just went like chalkboard. And I went, first of all, I'm not your son. And I'm pretty darn happy I'm not. And then I went down and said, this is the way it's going to work. And, after that, I mean, I knew I had to establish the fact that I really was the buyer.
I actually got something into my head. Is this what got you fired from McDonald's? This
kind of that, yeah. Except I made the mistake of not really being. Like I told, yeah. So I won't get into it. But so what ended up happening was I did really well. My departments did really well, and the company at the time was going through a major remodeling. They were trying to update the store. It hadn't been updated in like 25 years, and they'd spent a lot of money. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is that fast forward like a year, now I'm like almost 20. I get told, hey, we're going to go up to see our Bakersfield store, because we had another store in Bakersfield. We had a warehouse. It was a pretty big company. And they go, hey, we're going up to Bakersfield. Come with us. And that was really unusual, because normally we plan those trips way out in advance, because it's not exactly a short drive. You go up and you stay overnight. You didn't just go up there for the day. And the controller and the general manager have me go out, and we get in their car, and then I'm in the back seat, they're in the front. And this is no lie. This is exactly what happened. We're actually on the Grapevine. And they pull over the side of the road, which is really weird. And they look over the back seat, and they go, we need to let you know something. When we get to Bakersfield, we have to tell them something. And I go, what? They go,
oh no,
we have some good news and some bad news for you. The good news is we're going to promote you to merchandise manager, which basically meant I was going to take over all the buying for all the departments. They're going to report to me.
For both locations?
For everything, all buying.
Okay.
So all buyers would work for me that bought whatever category, garden, plumbing, whatever. Okay. And I was 20, and they go, but the bad news is we're filing Chapter 11 on Monday morning at 8 a.m. It's Friday, right? So I'm like, so I don't really, to be honest with you, understand this.
Yeah.
And I know a little bit about bankruptcy, but not enough.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what that means. And basically what happened, they'd gotten overextended. They couldn't make the payments on their line of credit. And long story short, they had to file bankruptcy, reorganization. So we went up to Bakersfield, and we told them that. And we said, we're in a reorganization. And then immediately we had to, there were some cuts that were made. Anyway, my first job as the boss was to reorganize a company going through bankruptcy. And part of the reason they wanted me in that job was because I had no baggage. Yeah, I was too young to have baggage. And then on top of that, they felt that I had the gift of gab, as you know, and I could talk the vendors back in to coming back into business with it. I had a plan to reorganize the company, and I did. So we came through the bankruptcy. There was a lot of things I did that were
like, how creative. Do you know to do even just going back and thinking, because now my role is in merchandising, and it's like, how did you even know, you're 16 going in and knowing that these things are going to work? And were you even passionate about home remodeling? I'm
passionate. I've always been passionate. I don't know what it is. For some reason, I've always been able to put myself in the customer's shoes. And it doesn't matter whether I'm, that demographic or not. I've always been able to think like a customer, and I look at everything through a customer's eyes. Yeah. And I don't know if that means I'm a born retailer or a born merchant. It was like I say, if I was buying patio furniture, what would get me excited, and how would I react to this, and how would I react to that, and what ad would work? And for some reason, my brain's always worked that way. And this from working with me, I sometimes have these ideas and things where sometimes people go, where did he come from on this? Yeah. And most of it comes from that, where I'm just saying,
because it's really fast too. In being in meetings with you, it's you'll get an idea and you're like, where the hell did that just come from? I don't, it does blow me away.
Well, some of it actually is, you got to remember, I'm like Methuselah. I've been around forever, and I think I've made every mistake. And, a lot of situations are repetitive in business. That doesn't mean that I don't I haven't come up with a lot of new stuff,
Right.
but a lot of times there's very few things you come up with that are completely new. Normally it's taking something and then adapting it to a new situation. And then also I'm a risk taker. I mean, you know me, I like to gamble sometimes. I like to make educated risks. And so when I do things, I'm kind of like, what's the payoff on being a little bit more, I'm not risk adverse. It doesn't mean I make things reckless decisions, but I'm a big believer in there's a cost to waiting. And I also have a thought process of what's the real downside if I'm wrong, as opposed to what's the upside if I'm right.
Right.
And I think that is in my head. That's all in my, when I'm doing things, that's in my head moving around. It may just move a little faster in my head than other people's, but.
And then do you think it's because of your experience that you can kind of foresee like the things that could go wrong and go right? Like, is it the experience?
I think it's my experience. I think I don't want to say this the wrong way because I think my brain works a little strange. It just is.
You've always said that.
It's filed a certain way.
Yeah.
I don't really know how to describe it, but I'm able to take in a lot of data and kind of make leaps.
You're right.
And I mean, I do it a lot of math in my head, pretty easy, so that helps me. So I can figure things out. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's experience based. Yeah, right. I mean, let's face it. I've made a lot of mistakes. I don't want to give you any pressure that everything I do comes out right, because this is not the case. I just try to make sure that the mistakes I do don't cause really terrible things to happen.
Right. I know I kind of lost my train of thought on that, because I think, so going back, you're now going into this new role, you're downsizing.
Well, no, I'm actually increasing. I actually was very aggressive, which is the same thing you'll know from working with me now. I tend to prefer to attack as opposed to retreat. So I immediately said, how can I drive more profitable sales that will create more money? One of the biggest things I did that saved the company was I made the decision to close our Bakersfield store, which was very difficult for the owners because they got money from it in rent and other things. So it was a bad business though. It was taking the profit from the main location in Whittier and diluting it. And so I made the decision to close that location down, which was a separate corporation. And then I liquidated it as the owner. But I bought the inventory as the debtor, and I bought it at a discount. I offered more than anybody else would pay for it, but I bought it. And the bankruptcy judge agreed to my plan. And that allowed me to basically buy like an entire store's worth of inventory, all the stuff I wanted at like 20 cents on the dollar, which immediately gave us a huge cash infusion and allowed us to come out of the Chapter 11 for the main location much stronger. And it also paid off the people on the other one, because we were the biggest debtor of the other location anyway. So we didn't hurt a lot of people. My goal was not to dupe people. It was to make sure I brought the company out of the Chapter and kept all those people employed, because there were hundreds of people working for me. So.
Right. And not to skip ahead, because we'll get to this too, but like in our current company working at Perch, you did kind of a similar thing during COVID when everything was like kind of shutting down. You saw it as an opportunity to kind of like trudge forward, which I thought was really exciting. And it's been really exciting working in that.
Like I said, I think I've always been that way to a certain extent, that I prefer to attack. It's just, to me, it's easier to attack than it is to retreat. If you can do it intelligently. But also, when I worked for Home Depot, as you know, for a while, and that also taught me a lot about aggressiveness.
Yeah. Do you want to go into talking about?
Yeah. So I'll fast forward here. So basically, what happens? I end up reorganizing the company. I end up taking on a higher position. I became general manager of the whole company. So all everything reported to me, and then I worked directly for the owners. At a certain point, there was nowhere else for me to go. I'm not part of the family, and there was limited opportunity for me to continue to go. So,
and are you going to college at this point, or is college done?
I was still going to college. I actually dropped out I had a lot of responsibilities at that time. I was running the company. I also was looking after my grandfather, my grandmother had passed away, so I was living with him. And then I also had, this full-time job, which was a big job. So I made the decision to drop out of school. I was going to school to be a manager, and I kind of felt like I was already kind of doing what I was going to do.
Yeah. I'm like, I feel like you got an MBA just doing
that.
Yeah,
kind of. But, at the same time, it can hurt you in the future, but it didn't, but it did. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. So what ended up happening was I decided I want to go from working from a small company to a big company. And during this time period, Home Depot and Home Base and all these other warehouse stores had come into being. And Home Depot had just opened up on the West Coast about 2 years previously. And I did a lot of analysis, and I told people I was looking to leave. And I had a good reputation. I had quite a few offers. I had offers just about to every company. And I really wanted Home Depot, because I felt like Home Depot was better. Now, this time that wasn't the case. I mean, it was like they were like one of the people, but I just felt it was better. It had a better feel. The store felt better to me. And I know that sounds weird, but
no, I get it. Like, as opposed to like Lowe's or going like the
Lowe's
vibe or
Lowe's didn't even
okay.
exist. I mean, they were like a little tiny company in the Carolinas. At this point, it was Home Base, it was Builders Square, it was Builders Emporium. These are all people that don't exist anymore, because Home Depot basically won. So I was hired to be the furniture buyer for Home Depot for the West Coast. They bought their stuff was bought regionally, and they had a buying office in Fullerton. So I took this job because I obviously had experience with seasonal furniture and knockdown furniture and so on. And at that time, Home Depot sold knockdown furniture, the bookcases, the desks, like IKEA stuff.
Okay.
And then while I was in the process of giving my notice, they decided to get out of the business. So they had hired me to do a job that no longer existed.
Home Depot did?
Yes. And so I was quite upset by that, because now they're saying, well, we don't have a job for you, but we're still going to hire you. Okay. And we're still going to pay you the same amount because you don't make any money. That's what they told me. But we're going to put you in a store, and I'm as an assistant manager. And I'm like, to me, it was like, I feel like I'm going back, 7 years backwards, and I'm not really happy about this. And I turned down some other really good offers, and now I'm thinking about resurrecting them. And I got a phone call. I was really unhappy with Home Depot. I'll be honest with you. I thought they jerked me around a lot. And at the time, I took it very personally. So I got a phone call saying that this guy named Bill Hamlin wanted to interview me. And I wasn't going to go.
From Home Depot?
He was from Home Depot. And then I mentioned to one of my friends that was a rep, I said, hey, he goes, oh my God, you got to go meet this guy. He is the president of the western half of Home Depot. He's like number 3 in the company. You can't turn down a meeting with him. And I'm like, you know me. I'm like, yeah, I can. He wanted to meet me on a Saturday, and I was like kind of fed up. And I actually, to be honest, I was playing golf with some friends, and I said, well, I'm playing golf with some friends, and he goes, well, you got to do this. So, I guess thank God the guy talked me into it. I showed up. Of course, I was dressed in slacks and a dress shirt. Even though everybody told me they're very casual, I just felt that was professional. Yeah. So I showed up on a Saturday, and the whole office is shut. His assistant comes out, and it looks like the building is dark. And she pops the door open. There's no cell phones at that time. I'm just banging on the door. He leads me into the back into this, catacombs, so to speak. It was this old thing that built airplane factory in Fullerton. So we go in the back, and he has me sit in his office while he's making these phone calls. And after he finishes the phone calls, finally he sits down. And the reason he wants to talk to me is the guy who was the head merchant for all of Home Depot at that time was named Jim Inglis, and he was from this same company in Whittier that I worked for. He had been there 15 years before me. He held the same job I did as head of merchant.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So he was curious as to why did this one company produce so many people in the industry? Because there was a lot of people that came from Sackett's. So anyway, I talked to him. We ended up he was a very creative guy, very intelligent. I really enjoyed talking to him. And he decided, he goes, listen, I really want you to to come on board. I think we can really use you. And, I mean, I know you want to be in merchandising, which is buying. Let's get you in here. I think there's this new thing we're thinking of doing. It's called we're going to call it Expo. There was just like the name they come up with at the time. And it's going to be the store that we're going to use to experiment with decorative products and then teach Home Depot how to sell them. Because that time Home Depot was very dirty. It was like, tools and lumber and cement. And, it wasn't window blinds and, they had paint, but not decorative stuff.
Yeah.
It was very ooga, and so the idea was that how can we sell these more decorative home improvement products in the same environment without losing what they had, which was a really good contractor business and what was driving the money.
Yeah.
So I was put into the Fullerton store, which was one of the busiest stores in the company at the time. It was like a $60+ million store, which, I mean, back then, a high volume home improvement store on the West Coast did like.
What do you mean you were put into that showroom? Because I thought he was putting you into I
had to go in and learn Home Depot. So they put me in the assistant manager training program.
Okay.
And then I was assigned as an extra manager on the Fullerton's payroll, which I'm sure they were thrilled by. And they just kind of left me there. And the idea was I'm next to the buying office. So when I need to do something for the Expo stores, I can. But my payroll is being picked up by the store because they didn't have a position to give me in the buying office. So I worked full time in the store, which full time and assistant manager at Home Depot at that time was about at least 80 hours a week. And then I also did the other job. So I was working pretty much all the time. And I didn't have any children. I was recently married. I'd been married for about probably 3 or 4 months at this point.
Oh, okay.
And so then what ended up happening
And how old are you at this time now?
Like 25.
25, okay.
25. And so what ends up happening, the thought process was the Home Depot merchants were going to they were going to have these ideas and they were going to bring them, they were going to meet with the vendors, decide what they wanted, and then they would give it to me. And then I would figure out how to display it. Right. Well, that's not the way it worked. They basically had no time. They were very busy. They're opening up a store like a week, and they could care less about this weird laboratory store in San Diego. And the only reason it's in San Diego is because they had an empty lot that they owned that they bought so that one of their competitors couldn't get near the highest volume store in the company at that time, which was the one on Balboa Avenue.
And you're talking about the Expo store that was in Encinitas?
Yeah, no, the Encinitas came way after. This was a store down off of Convoy in 163.
Oh, okay.
And so the idea was that we're supposed to build this store. So it had a very large budget. It was very different. And basically what happened, I ended up doing most of the buying for every department because no one was doing anything.
Right.
And so I started off by doing my departments, which were lighting, electrical, the garden department. And then I also, for some reason, was involved in picture framing and art. And then what happened
crazy. You did all those departments?
Yeah, but then I also took over kitchen and bath and appliances and cabinets.
Yeah.
And pretty much in hardware, the only department I didn't buy tile and I didn't buy millwork, even though I did set up the deal with Anderson. But there was a guy working with me, but it's not that I was like, oh my God, look what I did. It was more like someone had to do it.
No, I guess because now me doing merchandising and I'm doing bath and plumbing and hardware, it's like, oh my God, like even that alone just.
No, I will say
that seems like a lot.
Sometimes I don't really understand how it came to be because I mean, we did have probably twice as many vendors as we have today. And I met with all of them. And I did the mix. I picked all the product and did the create sheets even. You actually had to write the description up for every SKU and fill it out.
I think I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you once you entered all that down, then you would give it to this person. They would input it. But I would literally sit there with stacks and stacks and stacks of these create sheets. And then I would put the amount I wanted of each item and set the margin.
Oh my gosh.
I set all the prices.
Yeah.
Obviously I used a lot of the vendors to help me, which is what I learned how to do that was to put them to work for me. So anyway, went in, long story short, we flash forward here. I was also the manager of a couple of the departments as the operational manager, as well as the buyer. So the plumbing and kitchen and bath was my department, as well as patio and seasonal and hardware. I was the manager, which meant I had to hire the staff. So I had to hire 37 people to work for me while I was doing all this. So anyway, it was a very trying time. It was very, very difficult time for my wife and myself too, because I was pretty much working 24 hours a day. And
newly married.
And I newly married. I moved her down to San Diego, and she wasn't real thrilled with this lifestyle. But we, obviously she persevered with me.
Now you can't get her out of here.
What ended up happening was, we got open, and
the expo got open.
There was no plan. There was no store planning at that time. Home Depot had racking.
And you're talking about the expo opened at this time.
So the expo was like weird. We had a showroom, and then we had this warehouse. So 2/3 of the store was warehouse, and 1/3 was the showroom.
Okay.
So I designed pretty much everything. So
I know, so you're saying like Home Depot is more like the contractor and like people go, and then the expo was more like the design center where customers would go to kind of see like the lifestyle piece of it or see the.
Well, no, it was like we were just literally selling products that Home Depot didn't sell. Like, it was like Home Depot sold faucets, but they basically sold replacement faucets.
Right. So it was more decorative.
It was not a decorative category. Right. It was like, here, my Delta faucet went out. Here's the Delta replacement.
Expos were around. Like, I definitely was around where I never went into an expo just because I didn't have a home at that time, but I do remember them. I just don't.
Well, there were over 50 stores. So, so the first one was in San Diego. We opened it up, and pretty much overnight we figured out we'd done something, because the store was doing massive numbers in bath in particular. And there just was these, we were selling like the volume of like 6 to 10 Home Depots in faucets. And, it wasn't like Home Depot wasn't selling any faucets. These numbers were incredible. And a lot of it, I did a lot of stuff that at the time was considered different. But to be honest with you, a lot of what I did, I just went and looked at stuff in Europe. I took a look and I saw stuff that was in showrooms. Like you didn't let people go to showrooms back then. You had to have a designer or a builder take you in there. And I went in there and looked at what they did and said, I could do this better. And I took what they did and then I enhanced it. So it's not like I just came up with this stuff in a vacuum.
Right.
And anyway, we opened up a store. We did massive numbers. The store was we opened up doing like, in the 600,000-700,000 a week. And we weren't selling, any of the stuff that drove the volume in a Home Depot. Right. And all the departments that didn't work at Expo were the ones that were the most like Home Depot. So anything that was like we sold molding and nobody cared. We sold paint. Nobody cared.
Right. So it wasn't conflicting.
No, I mean, so our business was almost 100%. We had no effect on a store that was 2 miles down the street.
Right.
So pretty much right off the bat, Home Depot went, this is something new. What is this? And so they made the decision to make it a separate entity pretty quick. And they promoted me into a new job that didn't exist in Home Depot. It was the general manager of Expo. And basically what that meant was I ran the store operationally, but I also was in charge of all the buying and all the marketing. I was in charge of everything. And that was the way they wanted it structured, because they felt that, I could continue to develop this. And then I was allowed to hire another 2 people to actually help me with the buying now, instead of just doing it all myself, which helped us a lot. Because
so you're basically at this point the only person, and you had hired, you said like 38 people to get this.
Well, I had sales people in my departments, and then I had department heads, and there were 9 assistant managers. We were structured just like the Home Depot.
Okay.
And the store manager and I didn't get along. He didn't like me because I wasn't Depot enough for him. And also didn't like the fact that I kept leaving to go on trade shows and stuff, because I was also the buyer.
And again, you're probably dealing with all older people, right?
No, at this point, I'm still younger than most everybody, but Depot had a very young, there's a lot of young managers.
Okay.
So anyway, I took this job and I became at like 27, by this point, it's 2 years, it's 27, and I took over as general manager. So I started designing the store in Atlanta that was going to be the new prototype. So the first store had orange racking in it, very different. You wouldn't even recognize it. Those people that ended up going to an expo. It looked almost like a Home Depot. I was joking, Home Depot with a dress on it. It was like very, kind of looks like the way Home Depot does today. I mean, it would, that's kind of what it would look like. So then what ended up happening was I opened up this new one in Atlanta, and we had 2 other sites in Long Island and in Dallas. The one in Atlanta opened up in 1994, and the Dallas and the Long Island one opened up in 95. Well, the problem was we were doing a lot of volume, but not making money. And the guy who I worked for at that time had a very set thought process of what he thought Expo should be. I had a different thought process, but I worked for him. He wanted it to be much more of like a hyper market, like Germany, where you sell everything and you like do all these services for customers. I thought we should be a project business where we helped people with major remodeling and we help people to do big decorative projects. The problem is those 2 businesses fight against each other. So the more traffic you get, the better for this, but it's bad for this. So he ended up leaving the company. He got pushed out. He was I won't go to sides thing. And when he left, they decided to promote me to vice president of merchandising. So I was 28, became an officer at Home Depot, which is a really big deal at that time. Yeah. And I put a guy in that was named Brian Scott, who was a lot guy in the first store. He's like a guy who shagged carts in the first Home Depot that had been in Home Depot and had gone up, managed stores and district manager and VP of ops and everything. They made him president of Expo. So I worked for him. And that was really good because it gave us a lot of credibility inside of Home Depot because Bryant was really well thought of and no one knew who I was. So anyway, we went along. We basically made the decision to re-engineer Expo. And in 1997, I went to Arthur Blank in 1995 and said I had a different idea. He liked my idea.
Who's Arthur Blank for people?
He's one of the founders of Home Depot. He was the CEO of Home Depot. And he was very big supporter of Expo. And he said, go build it. And I'm like, okay. And go build this new store. So we have 4 stores that are doing volume. He says, go build this new one. And I went down he says, I'm going to do it down in Florida. We had a place. And his only criteria was I had to be there every week. I thought he was kidding, but he was dead serious. So every week for a year and a half, I flew to Florida. And we built this store that was much more of a low traffic consultative sale, much more like a Ferguson or like that kind of off the beaten path, not a main for retail. And it made money. So we made the decision to do another location with what we learned from there that was kind of between the 2. We opened that up in Boynton Beach in 1997. And that pretty much became the model that we rolled across the United States. And we had them in like 26 states. And, we were rolling along and everything was kind of good. And, we had our ups and downs. I won't bore you with all that. But by that point, I was a senior vice president for Home Depot.
And how old are you at that point now?
I think I became a senior VP when I was like 32.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Around there. I don't really remember exactly. But
no, it's still pretty phenomenal because that role, you're like 32. And like, what is that like equivalent to somebody like that?
Well, a senior VP at Home Depot was a pretty big job. I mean, basically, that meant you had officers working for you. So you had VPs working for you. Okay. And you had a lot more power. So basically, I had the same job. My job didn't really change. I just had more people working for me. Right. But my responsibility was it just kept growing. I always jokingly say that every day Expo was the biggest company I'd ever managed because it kept getting bigger. Right. So, we went from 1 store to when I left, there were like 34 locations. Right. I built them. The store planning worked for me, marketing, design, and all the merchants. So anyway, I love my job. And then Home Depot made the decision to change CEOs. The board made a decision that they felt they needed to make a change. And they brought in a new guy from General Electric who had very different ideas. And I won't get into a lot of that, but basically, I just didn't really like my job anymore. And I'd never really sold any Home Depot stock. I mean, I'm fast forward here, I've got a 5-year-old son at this point.
Yeah. So in that time from you opened the expos, you said it was 50 stores that you had opened in the matter of
Well, we opened 34 before I left.
Okay. So then
so basically what happened was I didn't mesh with the new General Electric culture. Mm-hmm. I'm a very big believer in culture, and there was a very strong culture with Bernie and Arthur that I really loved, which was taking care of your employees, taking care of your customers, providing value and giving people a career. And while some of those things might have been parroted, I didn't believe they were really the beliefs of the company anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, my wife, she kind of gave me that Solomon talk, and she said, you don't even like your job anymore. Why are you doing it? And I'd become very unempowered. We became very bureaucratic. Support functions became very controlling of the business. HR, training, legal, everything just became like a quagmire, and I don't work well with that. I don't want to spend 3 months trying to come up with a decision that's the right decision. And
it's funny because now going and just kind of moving through this, because now you're the president and CEO of Perch, which were like a home. You want to share
so basically I'm one of those really weird people. I joke, I did retire. I moved my wife back to San Diego, and I just Seacrested out. That's what I always say. I just went boom, popped the bullet.
So from 38 to when you came back,
I disappeared. I mean, I did do some stuff, but I told my wife I wouldn't leave San Diego until my son was out of high school. And so basically what ended up happening was I was here. I did some other stuff for a while there. I was involved in Ruby Tuesday. I was CEO of a group that was going to open up a bunch of restaurants. We had out the LA market, and of course then the economy tanked, and that's all. Everybody knows that story. Mm-hmm. And then I was going to take a job with another company that had expressed interest in me at Floor Decor. But
what had you want to go back in? So you retired at 38.
I was a retiree, and I lost a lot of my net worth when the market collapsed in 08. So and knowing your lifestyle, because I met you when you were retired at this point, he lived a very fun and very fruitful life, because your philosophy on that, let's share that philosophy, because I actually think it's actually a very admirable philosophy. Part of my thought process was I'm going to retire at 38 when I'm young enough to really enjoy it, and then I'll be more mellow when I get older. But I believe that I want to enjoy life. I want to share what I do and share it with my friends. And life's too short, you never know. And I don't want to have regrets that I didn't do that. I've traveled all over the world. I've done many. I mean, sometimes it even stuns me how many different things I've done.
It stuns me because you're probably for your position and what you've done you're probably, as we laugh, your ego, but you're probably one of the most humble people that I know too. And very yes, you like the nice stuff and doing extravagant things, but you're also very generous and humble, which I know you don't always want people to know that side of you, but I do.
Well, look, I mean, here I got a piece of advice. So this is actually a good tie into what ended up happening. So now fast forward, my son's out of high school. I told my wife, look, I think I need to do something before I'm too old that anybody want me. And if I want to do it, if I want to make it in my field, I'm worth a lot more if I can do something in my field. And that means we're going to have to leave San Diego, because there's no retail organizations based out of San Diego, at least maybe Petco and a couple ones. So I made the decision to do that. And then this thing kind of just fell into my thing. I'd never really heard about Perch. It tells you how much I'd separated, because a lot of it has a lot of similarities to Expo. And the private equity people had it were looking for somebody to come in and help set it right. And I had a good team. There was good people at Perch. There was good leaders that were still there. That some of the other ones were gone. And it was something that really ignited my old passion again. So, when I took this job, there was a friend of mine that was worked for Bain Capital, and he basically told me that, Steve, because he worked for me at one time. He said, he goes, you're one of my best bosses I ever had. I learned you're really good about training and stuff. And I thought, I get awkward about that. So, and he said, you manage really well down. He goes, people, like, you're really good with truth and everything. Because you are the worst when it comes to managing up.
Mm-hmm.
You just have a tendency to tell everybody the emperor has no clothes. You just are very blunt with people that are your bosses. And he goes, you've always gotten results, so people cut you slack. But you got to understand that when you work with private equity, you may need to temper your way of talking to people. So that was interesting what you said there, because that's one of the things that I'm actually more comfortable. I find. I don't know what it is. I just always have been that way. So fast forward, I come into Perch, I look at it. When I got here, there was
I was gonna say, what was the state of Perch that was like, Perch?
That's probably, there's obviously, they had opened up some stores in some other markets, and it had not worked the way they would have liked.
Mm-hmm.
It had overexpanded too quickly. The company takes a lot of infrastructure to run correctly, and they duplicated it, which made it very non-profitable. Mm-hmm. So they had made the decision before I got here to retract back to California, which was the profitable part. And when I came in, that had already been done. And they wanted the company to get back to where mm-hmm. it needed to be, mm-hmm. to become more profitable, and then to expand. Then my plan was to expand it the right way. Mm-hmm. So we had done a lot of work on that. And I won't go into a ton of details, but basically we really worked hard on our bath business. We worked hard on changing some of the philosophies about selling on price, which I don't believe in. And, taking the really good parts that we had and building on them. And that's what we did. And so now we're at least a couple times larger as a company than we were. And we had, before COVID, we had already made a lot of really positive changes that had really built the company into a much better position to be able to weather this. And when COVID started, obviously a lot of us in the world did not know what was going on. We didn't know, is this going to be, what is it going to be? Nobody knew.
Right.
And my feeling was that in times of turmoil, it's the best time to take market share. It's also the best time to, be aggressive and drive forward, not retract. So that was the decision that we made. And, we were out there very quickly. Our business was very well set up to work remotely. We did our own installation, which gave us a lot of control over how we interact with customers. So we could do it safely for our employees and safely for them. We also had a very low traffic business model, consultative sales, so we could work by appointments. So there's a lot of things that helped us to be successful, as well as obviously when customers all got in their own homes, they went, oh God, my dishwasher stopped working because now I'm doing it 10 times a week. And we were in a position to help with that. And so we very quickly took on more and more business and started growing. And
but I think though too, because I know you talk, I know at the start of COVID, it was like we're big enough to make an impact, but yet we're small enough to be able to move and change, where you talked about Home Depot, where the bureaucracy that they can't adapt as quickly.
It's not even bureaucracy. It's more like just the fact that larger companies, it's harder to make quick decisions in this kind of environment. They have a lot of resources to react to it.
Right.
And they have a lot of cash, which is a really good thing.
Right.
But we were able to be more nimble, and we could make decisions, and then we could move into them really quickly. Where, obviously when you're hundreds of billions of dollars or tens of billions,
right,
you have to, things move more glacially.
It's like a big tank.
Yeah, it is. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't use I mean, everybody always goes the big super tanker as opposed to the speedboat, but
Hmm.
we're big enough that we have buying power,
Yeah.
but we're not so big that we can't react. And we made a lot of strategic decisions. I don't really want to go into them
No,
in
you don't have
depth,
to. That's not what this is even about. So
but
no.
and I'll probably bore everybody to death anyway. But what the good news is that a lot of stuff we've done has been very good and it's worked out well. I mean, obviously you've been involved a lot in the plumbing and the hardware piece as we develop that and growing that business. And that's important because it's a little bit of a higher margin business, which helps us to have a better mix. And I believe that COVID has changed the way people look at their purchasing. I believe that the consumer looks at their home differently. I think everybody valued their home, but after COVID, I think people value it even more.
Hmm.
They after they it's their sanctuary, and they want to be able to enjoy it more, and so they want to remodel, they want to make it better, they want to have an outdoor entertainment area, they want to have a home spa, they want to have a kitchen that's better. So it's one thing to have an oven that you kind of like if you use it twice a week, but when
Right.
you use it for every meal, you figure out all the things you don't like, and that's why we've been so
Right.
we've done a lot of business. And I don't see that changing. I think that there's certain things that changed from things like September 11th. That when World War II happened, the whole American economy changed from things that happened during that. And I think some of the changes here are not going to go away. I think people do
Right.
value their homes differently. And I think there's going to be a lot, like the whole outdoor business, I think is going to be huge for a long time to come. And uh, and we're trying to make sure that we take full advantage of that and grow the right way, the profitable way. And that's what we've been doing. So we've been growing. One of the things I'm probably the most proud of is that everybody, we have a lot of people we kept employed during this period, and
Yeah.
we've added like almost 200 new employees.
Yeah.
And they're good jobs. They're good jobs, and I want people to be able to have careers. And I want to take the culture that I learned from working for Bernie Arthur and use it in a different way in our environment, put our spin on it. But it all comes down to the same thing. You treat people with respect, you give them opportunity, you create an environment that fosters creativity and drive, and the financial results come.
Yeah.
If you create that environment, good things happen. And you have to have business controls. It's not like we're like La La Land. But I think if you do that, I know for me, it was I really love that environment. It made me want to do really good for the company when I
Yeah.
worked at Home Depot. And I believe that's what's happening with us. I think our
Yeah.
employees value the Perch family and the company, and they want it to be successful because they know they're going to be successful and they're valued. And I think that term, I truly mean it. I know that this is not Steve Smith's achievement.
Right.
I may be part of it, but there's a lot of people that are involved in making this happen, and they all have different pieces that made it work.
I always get that from you. And, we talked about, like, I was self-employed. Like, I came out of college working for myself for 20 years. So going and taking a job, I was very nervous because I had my own like structure going on. I had my own schedule. I had a lot of flexibility. And so going and thinking and working in an office and having set hours, it was actually what kept me away from ever wanting a job, and then I'm like, gosh, I'm proud that I was self-employed for 20 years. And what actually had me want to go take a job was to be a part of a team and to be on something that I could grow bigger than myself. So I do see that in, starting as your executive assistant and working very closely with you. I'm forever grateful to you because I think you knew that I just was like so hungry to learn business and learn. And I always just wanted to learn how like your mind thinks, and, and you seeing how like you actually really empower your people to make choices, to make decisions, and to empower them in why they're doing it. And there is like such a really great culture that people just work their asses off. And I know like specifically in the last 2.5 years, our business, you know, adapting and changing every day with all the different changes of COVID that we had to do, and then growing at the same time, you know, and just I
think that this has been a very challenging environment to work in and also to manage in. And I think you got to be sensitive to the effects that this is having on people. And you know, I jokingly said, I'm not very good about I'm the kind of guy that if there's a fire in a building, I'm not the one who's going to be running around yelling. I'm going to be like, okay, let's all head to the exits, because I'm not sure what the yelling does for us. And that doesn't mean I don't feel about it. I really do. But I just think that's my job. My job changed. My job changed when COVID hit, from, you know, making Perch more and more successful to making sure there was a Perch coming, because we really didn't know. I mean, I want to make sure there was a company. And then obviously that changed relatively quickly, where I said, oh, this is something we can actually use to drive more business, because there's a need for what we're doing. And, you know, I'm very excited. I mean, I see a lot of opportunity for people that work for us to grow. And to be honest with you, there was a time where I wasn't really into training, and I just didn't see the value in it when I worked for Home Depot. And I was kind of forced to do it. And then over time, I learned that the most satisfying thing to me was watching someone that you helped, you know, become like something, you know, like you go like, I'm proud of all the people I've trained and that have worked out in the industry, and they've gone on to bigger and better things. And, you know, and that's not because, you know, I like took them and molded them into this shape and then like roboted them off.
Right.
It's because in some ways, maybe I helped them, you know, maybe I gave them a nudge or taught them something. And that's a lot more lasting than, you know, deciding to put up a display.
Right.
You know, I mean, look at me. I created or helped create Expo. That became a huge company, you know, billions of sales, and it went away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'm much more proud of the fact that there's all these people that I helped develop careers in that are still in the industry. They're everywhere.
And it's cute because when you came back, like people were like, you hired me, or you know, like you still get stories of people like you trained and developed.
It is weird because, you know, you don't think about the fact that I was so young that, you know, I was gone for so long, but I'm still alive, so to speak. It's kind of weird because I started so young, you know, I can still be, it's like, you know, it's like I'm still, you know, people come and they go like, oh yeah, you hired me 27 years ago. Yeah. And it's kind of weird where you go like, wow, really? Am I really that old? Because I don't feel that way, but but it is the industry. You know, there's a lot of things. You know, I mean, there's challenges. Obviously, there's a lot of challenges right now, and you know, I think I'm better suited to be a CEO today than I was in my younger years. I might have had, to a certain extent, more power when I was younger because just the company size was so big. But
I would love to talk to that too, because you always, like, to me, you have your moments of like, you know, hyper, more this, like, because I know you because we've worked so close together and just knowing you as a friend. But like you always say, oh, how I used to be back in the day, you were like this way. And like, it's hard to see because you're not that way now. Like, well, you know what I mean? In terms of how I
guess here's the thing I say. I like to think that everybody learns from things they do, and you learn good and bad things. And there's some things that were attributes that made me successful that I'm not proud of when I look back on them. You know, I was very impatient. I had a tendency to take over if people didn't move fast enough instead of taking the time to explain how to do it. And I didn't suffer, you know, the cliche, I didn't suffer fools. I tended to be not very sympathetic to people not getting it. It's like, okay, why aren't you getting this? You know? And I think in some cases that made me a tough guy to work for. And I was able to maintain what I did because I made results. Okay. I always did what I'm supposed to do. But when I look at it this way, I think I'm better now that I've learned that I don't have to be involved in everything. It's better for me to teach people. It's better for me to, um, you know, not be that guy, be someone that people are comfortable, not intimidated by me. I mean, I know it sounds weird because you would think I'm more intimidating now because I'm the CEO, but I cast a very big shadow in my old job because, I was this guy, I was kind of like the founder, and I was involved in everything, and I just felt like I had to be involved in everything. And I think that's part of youth. And I think
but they also like involved you in everything, but it was like kind of like wanting the control.
Well, I know. I think when I had an old boss that really helped me. That initially I didn't really like the guy, but he came from department stores, and he said, "I found the problem at Expo, and it's you." And I was very offended by that because I'm like, "Man, well, I'm the guy. How could you possibly tell me?" And he basically was saying that everybody comes to you and you make the decision, and he goes, they actually like it. They like the fact that you'll make the decision for them. And and because he goes, and the worst thing about it is you're usually right, and so that's the worst part, is it fosters you doing this, and because of that your people aren't growing, and you're going to become the problem because you can't be everywhere.
Right.
You're developing a system that basically is completely Steve centric, and you need to like not do that.
Do you find that hard now to let go of that?
No, I actually don't. I think I found that if I'm involved at the right points and I put good people in the right situation and I make sure they understand where the pitfalls are, I'm more of a consigliere instead of a dictator. And I'm not saying people that worked for me back then didn't mind. They liked working for me. That came out after I left. But there's part of it that I think I'm more effective today. I think I'm better as a CEO because I was definitely the guy that just wanted to be, behind the curtain. I mean, just I'll pull all the levers. No one needs to see me. I'm under there and I'm going to make money. I mean, all the vendors knew me, but I was kind of like, here comes Steve. They were, and now it's more like, I've also learned how to become, I think, a better partner with vendors than before. I think I was better near the end, but at the beginning it was more like, you'll do it because I said to do it. And part of that was because I was moving at an incredibly fast pace. And, I also, as time goes on, you have different, I guess you just learn that you don't have to be at that level. You don't have to run at that intensity. I'm still very intense.
You're intense. I'm intense too. So I get it. So, do you think you like kind of found that piece maybe through when you were in retirement that you kind of learned, or you got to reflect time?
Yeah, I mean, it's maybe in some cases I got humbled a little bit. I'd always been like incredible. I've always been very successful, and I had a couple things that weren't successful,
your streak.
And I kind of went, wow, I can't believe this. Something didn't work that I did, and
because you talk about your streak of bad luck, right?
I was always a very lucky person. I always thought about that. And then there was this period of like 3 or 4 years where I just felt like everything I did was like went bad, and it was really weird for me because my wife says, now you know how everybody else feels. But I used to think I could fix anything with my personal, if I get into it, I can fix it. And I learned that wasn't true during that period. Like I couldn't make the restaurant casual dining work at that time. And there was nothing I could do that would make it work. I mean,
it's also like out of your control though. Like,
well, it was, but at the same time, you look at COVID. I mean, I looked at it. I said, okay, look, how are we going to do business in this area? We're going to do it. Like, and to be honest with you, I thought there's going to be less business. And my attitude was, how do we get it?
Right.
In that case, it was like there was no business. Everybody stopped doing it out. And at the same time, we're trying to establish a brand that didn't exist on the West Coast. And it was literally impossible.
Right.
And it was very hard for me to come to grips with that. Having something not work and having to close it down and say, I couldn't fix this. I couldn't make it work. That was very humbling for me.
Yeah.
And then I did something else that didn't work as well either, before I came here. And it wasn't because I wasn't, the good news was it wasn't because I kind of had become like
they weren't the right things.
They weren't the right things. And they also weren't, it just wasn't the right time.
Right.
So, this is the right time, and I think I'm in the right position. And, I jokingly say sometimes, and people always ask me this, where you're going to be here, right? Sometimes people ask me that, and I go, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. Look, I'm 58. This is probably my last big hurrah.
Right.
But I plan on being here for a while, and then, one day I'll just disappear. I'll just melt into the ground. Because it will be like, it won't be needed to be fixed or created, or it'll be like a different phase, and I may not be necessarily the right guy at that time.
Right. And I can see you.
I'll become that guy on the board that ruins everybody's day.
Well, and I can see the pattern, like, of hearing this whole conversation of like you say, you like to take things and fix them to make them, like, you like to fix or find a solution. And I think too, even like when we deal with our vendors, if things are kind of like stuck or there isn't like an agreement that we can come to, you're like, there's always a way and there's always a solution, and we're partners and we'll figure it out. And I think, in my beginning days working with you and being able to sit in countless of meetings with you, I just love your negotiation skills. And I think people always comment on your negotiation, because you always do try to find a win-win for both parties. And you always taught me that too, is just trying to find something for them to win and that we can win at as well.
Part of that is, I think that if you think about it, we really need them to be partners. We need them to commit resources. We need them to be here next year.
Right.
If you beat someone to death and squeeze everything, I could squeeze more. But if I do that, it's like, why do they want to be partners with me?
Yeah.
Why do they want to invest? Why do they want to give us displays? Why do they want to invest in new stores? They're not going to want to do that because we're not a good channel. So it doesn't mean I'm Father Christmas, but at the same time, we need to find out what it is that they need. What do they want? And it's not always sales. Sometimes it's, I want to be positioned a certain way, or I need to be, you give me credibility in the market. And you've heard me say many times, I'll go, this is what they want. And I know sometimes you look at me kind of weird. I go, no, this is what they want. And you go, well, how do you know? Well, I just putting myself in their position. And the only frustration I usually get into is when I'm going, these people are like driving me nuts. They should want this. Right. And they're too bureaucratic to realize they want this.
Well, I love it too, because now businesses, like, especially through the transition, like in being in meetings, people are like, or how are you doing it? I think they try to take what you're doing so they can apply it to their business. Cause I think they're just kind of blown away of what you have created.
It's a whole bunch of things though. It's not like some magic bead.
No, I know. Well, I also too, because of the state, like, Perch had been like across the country, narrowed down to just California, and then now growing it to where we're growing again, and just seeing like the vendors and people seeing that like expansion decrease, and then now the expansion again, they're like, what's going on? Because we're actually like healthy. Well, I think
the thing they're happy about is they know this is a profitable expansion, and that's really important.
Yeah.
Doing something just to expand and just to do things to be sexy is not, it's not long term.
Yeah.
It's transient. And I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in building something that has a good foundation. It's the old thing, you build a good foundation, then you can build on it. If you don't build the foundation, it's going to fall over. Yeah. And that's kind of what happened with Perch when they expanded, was the foundation wasn't ready for what they put on top of it, and it collapsed. And the good news was the customers love it, the vendors want it, and we have really good people working for us.
Yeah.
And, you know, with all those things, it didn't take that much for us to get better. I mean, for me, it was a lot easier than it could have been.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more difficult when, if, you know, number one, if the customers don't like you, then it's really tough. But if you don't have good employees, how do you get it to work? And if your vendors don't want you to, you know, if they think this is a bad channel, but we had those things. It was just figuring out how to do it in a way that was profitable it's, I mean, I'm always, you've heard me say the statement many times. I go, look, there's no doubt that Perch is very sexy. It's got a lot of sex appeal. It's very, you know, sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Okay. We just need a little more steak. And now we got the steak with the sizzle, and that's what really makes everything work.
And I know we've been talking a long time, and I just want to talk to you because another thing that I always hear that when you talk to vendors is the employees and the people that we have working, you call them like diamonds in the rough. And I love that because I think too, with you and like your course that you went through, you don't really look for just the typical person that might fit this job, or they have this experience and they have this amazing resume, but you really like can see through things to where somebody.
I call it capacity. I hire based on capacity more than I do for skill. Now, that doesn't mean, like, there's certain jobs, you know, you have to have the skills to do it. I mean, you can't hire someone to be your controller and not have them have accounting background.
Right.
But I have found that if you hire somebody that you think has a lot of capacity to do more stuff in the future, then you have resources when you grow, because I'm planning on growing. I mean, I was planning on growing. So you want those. You know, what's interesting though, and this is what we're starting to transition this way, is when you're very small, or you're at a certain size, you have a lot of people that I call Swiss Army knives. And that means they can do like 7 different jobs. And those people are really valuable to you, because you cannot have 7 people. You need 1. What's happening now is, because we're growing, we're having to start to have people become more focused in an area and give up, let's say, 5 of those functions, concentrate on 2, but now they need to be able to like handle extra people working for them and more volume and all this other stuff. And so what's the challenge for us, and the challenge for me, is how do I adapt those people that were really, really, really good as Swiss Army knives, now make them really, really good in their new role, that's just maybe more narrowly defined, but a bigger job.
Right.
And make them not feel like they're giving something up, because you're saying, no, I don't want you to do these other 4 things anymore. I want you to do these 2, but these 2 things are a much bigger deal. And I need you to focus. And then for that matter, it's also like saying there's real advantage in taking somebody who understands Perch and understands the way we do business and understands our culture, and using them in a different position. That's a big advantage, because they know how to navigate the company, where if you bring somebody in that hasn't done that, they have to learn us while they're figuring out how to have an impact.
Right.
And so I love to be able to promote from within. And, you know, we can't promote everybody from within because we're just growing too fast.
Right.
But yeah, that's part of my challenge. I mean, I want to make sure we have a bench for managers and directors, and, you know, how do we start to develop people internally, and you know, at the same time, while we're doubling in size. So, you know, there's a lot of balls in the air. But that's, you know,
this is your favorite part. This is your favorite part.
Yeah, I would be lying if I said I don't like it, because I actually like it.
This is your favorite part.
I don't like going, what am I going to do today?
Right.
I mean, that's not my nature. I like having 14 pies flying at my head and figuring out how not to get hit.
Right. And so my next thing is I want to ask you is, what is your legacy that you want to leave?
You know, I mean, I will say that when they closed Expo down, I'm not a depressed person, as you know. I just don't, I'm not wired that way. But it really did. I mean, it bothered me because I thought of all these people whose jobs and careers and all these partners that I had invest, and it was frustrating because I kind of went, look, I'm a retailer, okay, and then I left this. At least I could say I created something that created all these jobs. So I guess if I had a legacy to leave, I'd like, you know, people to say I had a positive impact on them. Not that I created a, you know, a really cool store where rich people buy stuff, or, you know, people that, you know, yeah, that's great. I'm more into like, I create all these jobs and careers, and I help people that maybe didn't know they could do something, do it. And I mean, I'm a challenging guy. I mean, I know that. I mean, the running joke is I'm only happy for 10 seconds, and then I'm not happy.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's good and bad. I mean, but you know, I definitely want to be able to be the guy who shows up and goes, hey, you know, I mean, that I helped that person start, and I did this, and I get a kick out of that. I mean, I'm going to get a much bigger kick out of that than one day looking at it and going, wow, I created a business that's, you know, $4 billion and does this much revenue. I mean, yeah, you know, that could go away. But the people that I train and the people I help develop, they'll go on into other. I know that's what Bernie and Arthur can go up to whatever you believe in, the pearly gates, whatever. And they know that they created thousands and thousands of careers.
And I can sincerely say that is like legit for you. And it's because I have other examples of you walking away from money. So I know it's not about the money. And I think that is actually authentically true for you.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not, you know, monetary.
No,
I mean, that sounds corny. I mean, and as you said, I do like nice wine. I do like nice meals.
There's nothing wrong with that, you know.
At the same time, though, I've been tested, and there are lines I will not cross for personal gain, and I just won't do it. And it doesn't mean that I'm like some sort of, you know, I just am not willing to compromise. I'm probably have much more solid boundaries than people would think I do.
Yeah.
I mean, if I give you my word, that's my word. And I mean, I know that's used a lot, but you know that. I mean, I'm like, look, hey, I'm a big boy. If I make a bad decision, I'll still stand by it, and I'll stand by my people. Yeah. If they make a bad decision, that's my own problem. I'll deal with them separately. Mm-hmm. Right. But you can rely on the fact that if Stephanie makes a commitment to a vendor, I will stand behind that commitment because I empowered her to make those decisions. I will never come back and say, oh, I don't agree with what she said, I'm not doing that. Mm-hmm. That to me, I personally think there's no way you can have any credibility in business if that's the way you run your company. And there's a lot of companies I do business with where, you know, their people are not empowered. And you've seen me do this many times where I'm going, okay, if you're not the decision maker, then I like you, but I need the person who can make the decision. Because I'm here, and the people that are my people can make decisions. Right. So I expect the same respect. Right. And I think companies that I think have got a challenge are the ones that think they have to control everything like this. Right. And I have been there, done that. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you it's not effective. Yeah. It's just not. And so I can throw a brick on a glass house because I know for a fact that I was that way, and I was successful for a period of time that way, and then I wasn't. Right. Yeah. Well, I'm so grateful to you, as you know, and I say you're my best boss, my favorite boss and best boss ever. Well, what's really bad, like big surprise, I ended up talking a half an hour longer than you probably had me wanted me. No, I know. I love it though. I appreciate it because I do find like I've gotten to hear your stories all throughout the throughout That's the years. Yeah. And there's so many gems. My work wife. You're like what my mom does with my dad when he tells the same joke. Oh God, he's not going to say this again. You know. I know. It is kind of funny that I will tell you one last thing that I think is kind of interesting is that I was around. I know Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank, and Bernie Marcus is one of the best orators. He just is very inspiring. He's the best what? One orator. You know, he's able to speak, and he's just mesmerizing when he, and what's funny is that after you sit in a lot, because I sat in a lot of his speeches, he basically was saying the same thing, like really simple, like take care of your people, take care of your customers, provide value, fight bureaucracy. That was it. That was pretty much that was pretty much it. Okay. But he said it differently every time.
Mm-hmm.
And he made it interesting every time. So I really try to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, sometimes it is the same, and if you're working for me and you have to, people go, well, Steve, can you explain what's going on with Perch? And it's like, I can imagine that having to sit in there and listen to me, because I sometimes get to the point, I'm like, oh my God.
No, I love it because again, I love it because I actually know like what you're trying to achieve. And so I also know, like, again, for me, when I came in, I'm like, I just want to absorb it all. I want to understand your brain. I want to think, because you do have this way. And I always consider myself to be an out of the box thinker, but you just have this out of the box way of thinking. And then, like I said, making it work for people without force. And you're just like, hey, this is my business. This is your business. If this doesn't work for you, or if this is what you want, this doesn't work for me. And you have like this confidence. So I just really wanted to like get that point across, because you have so much, like, again, your mind just kind of blows me away.
I think the mistake most people make is that you've heard me say this to you before, is they come in with their agenda.
Mm-hmm. And
they have it all written down. Here's my 30. I mean, you're a little bit like this. This is your nature. You're very organized. And I can be frustrating for people sometimes, because they'll come in with this agenda of like 14 things we're going to do, and I'll go off on where the hell is he going? And a lot of it's because I'm reading the room and I'm reading the acceptance of what I'm saying. And in some cases I'm going, oh, that agenda just doesn't work.
Yeah.
They're not buying what we're selling, and then I'll change. And I do think it's a strength that I adapt the meeting to the reception.
And I know I've been in meetings where it was like super tense, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden, like, something just shifts in the meeting. And I think, and you don't budge. You're not like mean or forceful or like dictating anything, which I guess too, in my head, when I thought of like working for a company and dealing with a CEO, and this is probably just what I perceived it, they're going to be this way, or their power and force and their way, the highway, like,
you're much better off. You're much better off if you save those moments when you do use the, so to speak, the power.
Mm-hmm.
You use it very selectively. You're much better off if you can convince people that your position or your idea is a smart way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I always say I'm logicizing them to death, which I know is not a word. I just use logic, and I say, well, this is what's in it for you, and this is what's in it for us, and this is why I think you should do it. And it's much better if you can get them to do that than it is to cram it down their throat.
Yeah.
And I again, maybe that's because I found that I just did much better with vendors when I was at Expo, when you got them to want to do it than making them do it.
Yeah, for anybody, right? Nobody wants to be forced to do anything.
I think that's one of the biggest mistakes, is people say they're great negotiators because they get a deal, and I'm like, you got the deal because you have the biggest pencil in the world.
Right.
Okay? You got the deal because you're buying for Home Depot. You didn't get it because you cut a really good deal. Now, if you could get them to do it without beating them to death, that's much more impressive to me than that. So,
and that's what I was trying to get across, is like, I find that like you have this confidence, and I wish we went more into that, or how that adapted, but like, hopefully that came across.
Well, next time, if you have a cocktail, if you do this, if you don't talk to me at noon, I'll do a cocktail.
We were gonna do happy hour. I thought we were gonna do happy hour, but next time.
But you weren't gonna have a drink. You were gonna pretend to have a drink.
No, I'd have a mocktail.
Yeah, so for me to have a cocktail at 1 o'clock in the afternoon is a little bit even much for me. So,
well, thank you so much for coming on. I know it's your weekend and you like to wind down on the weekend.
So my wife has been listening to me upstairs going, oh God, is he
oh gosh, I know. Oh gosh, here he goes again.
Yeah, she'll be, God, she's gonna have to edit that down for like 4 hours.
Cut out a big chunk. No.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah.
so. Thanks
All
so
right.
much.